Okay, that's super. I was going to say,
Yes.
I just really want to thank everybody for coming. I know you're very, very busy. We're going to try to keep this just to 1 hour. And basically what we're doing with this, as you know, is that we've got a series of webinars on the run-up to our crowdfunding campaign, which is launching on the 31st of August. So the last one, the one last week was Ask Us Anything. That was open to everyone. This one is actually a closed session. So basically, unfortunately, I think there's been a bit of a miscommunication in terms of why some people think that this was like an open session, but it's not. It's just basically just the members of the panel. So just to start off, what we're talking about is the barriers to employment for disabled people, something very, very close to my heart. As some of you probably know my story, you know, I'm a part qualified accountant. I've also got a master's degree, but despite that, it was very, very hard to get a job. And most of the jobs I was actually offered, I was completely overqualified for. So what we're going to do is basically talk about barriers to employment, and also as well, one of the reasons in terms of we set up Access Rating as a social enterprise was for us to be able to actually offer job coaching at SEND schools. Because initially we were thinking about, okay, should it be a limited company? But with it being a social enterprise, that means that any money we make then goes back into the work we're doing at SEND schools. So what I'd like to do is start off is that we're just going to do a very quick introduction, and I'm going to do it in first name alphabetical order. So I'm going to start off with David. So if we could limit it just to 2 minutes, please. For each person.
Okay, hi, I'm David Gordon. I'm an associate professor of marketing at Montfort University. I'm a wheelchair user. I've been in a chair for about 12, 15 years, a stick before that. I'm head of the marketing department, but also advise a lot of students about employment and employability. I've taken on grads for a number of years, and specifically those students with a disability themselves. We have a fantastic disability department at the Montfort, but when it comes to employability, especially around the marketing and business area, they often come and see me for some tips.
That's super.
From me.
So number 2, Hardeep.
Hi guys, thank you very much for welcoming us, Mark. It's really good of you. So my name's Hardeep. I've spent 25 years in financial services and banking. 2006 was a big change for me because my son, Ishan, was born with a severe brain injury at the last minute. And I learned very quickly that no matter what money I had in the bank, I couldn't reverse his brain damage, unfortunately. And that really, really changed my life. I knew then from that point on, I wanted to do something in the world of disability, but I didn't know quite what. And then I met a dragon from Dragon's Den, which one of you watch him, is James Caan, one of the original dragons. And he really took me under his wing, and he taught me a lot about entrepreneurship and starting businesses. And that was where my real passion was. And then I met my current business partner, Shane Bratby, who also founded disabledentrepreneurs.co.uk. And he was the one that told me that people with disabilities really struggle with raising money for their ideas and starting businesses. And it suddenly sort of made me realize that, okay, well, actually, if I've got all this, investment entrepreneurship background, why don't I bring this into the world of disability, which is where my passion's always been, and actually set up a company that can help disabled people to start their own businesses. And that's how Kaleidoscope Investments started. So fast forward sort of now 5 years, we've met over 1,000 people with disabilities. And we found a lot of them actually, they don't want to start commercial businesses. They actually want to do something from a charitable point of view or something to give something back. So we set up a charity called the Kaleidoscope Foundation to help them and give grants. And then more recently, we started to get a lot of people that are talking about recruitment. And actually, I'm sure you'd all know the Valuable 500 initiative and raising the bar with employers. So we've just recently or about to launch a recruitment business as well. So Jane, I'm so glad you're on this call because I'd love to do something more with you. I think this is a gigantic space. And I actually got Hayley to do some research earlier. There are over 39,000 recruitment companies. And the question for all of us is how many of those are focusing on disability, right? So I think anything to do with, employment for me is all about purpose. The people with disabilities have to find purpose because they're given fair chances and a level playing field. And Kaleidoscope is all about helping and working with others to create that level playing field and give opportunities.
Well, thank you, Hardeep. Great plug there as well. Okay, thanks, Percy. Jane, please.
Hi, yes, so thanks for being here, for letting me be here. It's a great honour. So I'm Jane Hatton and I founded Even Break in 2011. Even Break is a social enterprise and our core offering is a very accessible job board run by and for disabled people. So we only employ disabled people ourselves. We work with employers who are enlightened enough to realise that this is a pool of talent they should be tapping into. And as well as the job board, we really work hard to try and help employers become more accessible and more inclusive so that they will employ more disabled people, and also to promote the business case for employing disabled people, because I think there's still a lot of, oh, poor things, we really ought to give them a chance. And, no, it's not about that, it's about talent, and trying to change the whole narrative around disability from this isn't doing something charitable, this is actually accessing talent that your organisation needs. So we're really working hard to make the whole world of work much more inclusive and accessible and positive about disabled talent.
Fantastic. Martin, you're next.
Hello, everyone. Good to be in such good company here tonight. I suppose the big thing is the lived experience. I have a neuromuscular disability, so growing up and even now, day to day, it's the barriers we all know about to accessing society and then being included in society. I started out I did a degree in economics and a master's in marketing, and that was also a big step into independent living and having care funding and a care team and living away from home. I then went off to London as sort of a big personal dream was to go and live and work in London, having done the degree in Coventry. And that was my first sort of experience of the barriers to employment. I would have naturally gone into finance and sort of city world, but there were various barriers to that I'm sure we'll touch upon in a minute, Mark. But in the end, my first job was at a disability charity because they were more open-minded and nurturing. And we're talking about 2006, so I know there's lots of initiatives that have got better and improved things more recently, but it certainly was hard trying to get a job in a non-disability world. After 5 good years at Scope, I left and went self-employed in 2011, and various things I've been involved in, including founding Disability Horizons with Shrin. We founded a Commable together, which exited to Airbnb a couple of years ago, and I'm now co-founder and CEO at Purple Ghost Agency, which is a influencer marketing agency. And very relevant to this event, I'm involved with Mark and the guys at Access Rating on the board as well. So yeah, I hope I can help bring some personal experiences and professional experiences as well to this conversation.
Fantastic, thank you, Martin. And last but not least, Samantha.
Well, I have to start with saying I'm really not worthy to be here with all of these amazing people, Mark. My journey through accessibility is very immature. I worked for an airline for a very, very long time and prided myself on the fact that I could make the check-in process the most efficient and the most customer friendly at Gatwick in 2012. Then joined the service provision for disabled customers 6 months later, and then stood in horror when I looked at what I'd delivered and thought I'd just alienated every single passenger that I was now looking after. I think I've had immense opportunities to learn, and I think I have joined this journey that's never going to, I'm never going to finish this journey. My learning is going to continue. All I want to do is make sure that passengers with disabilities who fly are given the best experience on every occasion. And I know that doesn't happen today, but you know, that's my aspiration, and I'm just going to sit back quietly and listen to these amazing people talk.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. Okay, so we've touched on the barriers to employment, and my first proper job was actually with a charity. This was in like 1994, so this goes really way back now. It kind of shows my age. And you'd have thought in 2000 things would have moved on. So what do you think are the current barriers to employment? I'm just going to throw it open to anyone who basically likes to start first.
We did some research on this actually.
Okay.
We had a university do some research asking disabled people what the biggest barriers were they faced when they were looking for work.
Yes.
And we had over 700 responses, so it was fairly significant, I think. And by far, the biggest barrier that they mentioned was not knowing which employers to trust.
Mm.
So what they were saying was that, you know, almost every employer says we are an equal opportunities employer, but actually the experience of disabled people is that most aren't. They may have started to look at race, maybe, and gender, and they're still behind in those. But for many employers, disability isn't even on the agenda, let alone, you know, being disability friendly. So one of the biggest barriers was we don't even know which employers are going to take us seriously if we apply for jobs. I mean, there are loads of other barriers as well, but that was maybe surprisingly the biggest one that we came.
I found that as well. I found that I worked for IBM for about 15 years, incredibly supportive. There were a couple of buildings that access was slightly an issue, but on the whole, really supportive. I worked with a number of colleagues from other large employers, and it always used to amuse me that they had the diversity groups and the people with disabilities as one, as though the people with disabilities were a different set of people. Why do they have a disability group? You know, it's like we employ people who breathe, and we all have certain disabilities, physical, non-obvious disabilities that people don't declare. And I've often thought, just following on from your comments about the research, I advise a lot of students, look for the symbol about disability friendly. Don't be put off if the person who's interviewing, because there's a myriad of people in the whole process of recruiting graduates and junior managers. There's a whole myriad of people, and the person that you first meet in that first engagement team aren't necessarily going to be the person you work with at the end. And so don't be put off, but equally, don't be cautious. But we all know from having met people, it's that eighth of a second too long look that people can give. Yeah. That is the absolute giveaway, isn't it?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, interviews came very high in terms of barriers as well, and people were saying exactly that. You know, the minute you walk in the room, you can see by the expression on their faces that there's a kind of, even though they don't actually say anything, there's an immediate, well, we're not going to appoint this person. And how many times do you want to put yourself through that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And if you're black as well, it's like a double whammy. It's like, you walk through the door, oops, disabled, no, black, no. I don't know. Right. Does anyone else want to contribute?
I was just going to bring in the notion of the social model of disability, which I learned when I was at Scope, and as an individual with a disability, it was very empowering, this notion that I am disabled by societal barriers, not disabled by my medical condition, which is called spinal muscular atrophy. So I think when we look at the three types of barriers, the access, the environmental barriers is one, the attitudinal barriers is a big one, because I think if we educate and fix the stereotypes and discrimination, the rest of it kind of falls into place anyway. And the third one being policy or procedures. And I always give the example of, you know, if there's a recruitment process and there's a test that I'm not able to do because it's using a computer or a bit of software that's not adapted for me, I'm not going to get the job. But actually, if that process would be flexible enough for me to show my ability or my talent, then it would no longer disable me. So I think those three types of barriers are a good prism. Doing these daily live streams I've been doing in lockdown, there's quite a few times has come up about, we always have talked about a person's health condition and the sort of the type of disability they have. It's a bit back to what David was saying, the sort of labeling. And when we talk about what is someone's access requirement, that doesn't even need to be because they have a health condition or are classed as disabled. Like, we all have different requirements and different needs. So I'm sort of seeing a solution maybe around when we talk about the world and the barriers. It's not just looking at the health condition or the type of way the barrier affects people. It's just, what are our access needs? And to Sam's point, when we're flying off, you know, with the airlines and through the airports, it's customer service, isn't it? It's just about treating everyone as an individual. And I think those couple of thoughts are quite powerful in unlocking how we overcome these barriers.
I think, you know, I've spent the last year talking to our people about the importance of understanding how their particular behaviours have a direct impact on how somebody feels that they've received service through an airport. And, you know, the guys that work for us have a unique opportunity to become part of somebody's memories for a particular journey or for a particular business meeting. And for me, it's about getting the right people with the right empathy levels to be able to deliver that customer service. And, you know, when I was doing a piece of work probably about a year ago, and I was applying for disability confident employer status. And what really shocked me was when I was talking to all of our people around the UK, and we work in a number of UK airports, people were doing really, really great things. You know, I had a call from somebody who said, oh, well, I actually needed to change that person's shift pattern because, you know, that they had to wait for dad to come home from work to be able to give them a lift because they couldn't get on public transport. So, and I was staggered at these amazing things people were doing that they didn't even realise would have been considered as reasonable adjustments. So we had this myriad of great things, and we weren't talking about it centrally. We're always so ready to fall on our knees when we have huge failures. And what we don't do is talk about the huge successes we have. We've had supported internships at Heathrow where we've seen young adults, you know, with learning disabilities who've come in and they've spent 3 months with us. Of the 4 young people who came in, 2 now work with us permanently, full time. And, you know, a reasonable adjustment for one young guy is that he doesn't like going through security, he doesn't like being touched. Absolutely get that, who does? So he now just works out in Terminal 2, Area B. That's where he stays all day. So he goes through security once a day. And he's really great with that. And he has the most amazing capability to connect with people within a nanosecond of saying hello.
That's fantastic. So Sam, you've actually picked up on the Disability Confident campaign. I myself have actually been part of it since, I think it's 2013, since it's launched. But my companies are actually partners. Do you guys think that, what are your thoughts on the Disability Confident campaign? And also, do you actually think that it's enough to tackle some of these barriers?
How honest do you want us to be in this one then, Mark?
Yeah.
Oh,
How
it is
long
being
do you,
recorded.
I'll often talk to students, and I have to get a kind of measure of the sort of person that they are, and that's not being judgmental, because I say to them, one of the approaches can be, one of humour, almost, just to almost a bit of relief with people, and again, we've all been in those situations. So there was one guy who walks with a walking stick. He got a neurological condition, walked with a stick and a slight limp, and he had a bit of a sense of humour. He was a bit of a lad, you could tell underneath. And he'd been for a few interviews, and this was about a year after graduating, been for a couple of interviews, had some small business jobs, and he wanted to go trying for a grad scheme again. And he said to me, it's that look they give you when you first walk in the room. And I said, but you should say to them, you almost stop, look yourself up and down and say, you should see the other guy though. He's in trouble. and the other one is, and I often use this, I say, there is a benefit in being in a wheelchair. No one ever tries to sell me a credit card at the motorway services. It's such a benefit. It really is. And that, just those little bits of humour. And again, you have to kind of gauge, is it appropriate? In a real professional setting, not necessarily so, but that, as we've all had experiences, I'm sure, can often just ease that bit of tension, that slight bit of humour.
So just going back to the disability confidence campaign and that we just touched on. So do you all think it's enough, or can it be improved on, or what other things can we do to actually tackle?
I think my view is that the idea behind it is right. Because as Martin was saying, it's about the social model. We don't need to change disabled people. We need to change the employers and the barriers and remove the barriers and, and all of that. So I think the intention behind it is spot on. What we need to do is make employers better at accessibility and inclusion. I think, and we're disability confident leaders, and we assessed Heathrow, actually. I assessed Heathrow against level 3 and passed. And so I think what we say to our candidates is, if you see that an organisation has the disability confident logo, it's an indication that disability is on their agenda. I wouldn't go any further than that, because the big problem with disability confident, DWP are aware of this, is their inconsistency in assessing. So I assessed Heathrow, but somebody else might have assessed Heathrow in a completely different way, and nobody would know that. There's no moderation. You just have to be a disability confident leader in order to assess other organisations against level 3. But there are, let's say there are 50 of us, we will be assessing in 50 different ways. I mean, there are kind of guidelines, but they're, how robust is it? How robust isn't it? DWP themselves are disability confident leaders. I don't know who assessed DWP, but I'm fairly sure I wouldn't have passed them on the knowledge I have of that organisation. And I know I'm saying this publicly. And I know that they're working hard to improve it. So it's not a criticism of DWP at all. I know that they recognise that there are challenges with the disability confidence scheme which need to be looked at. And one of them is this idea of moderation. So at one point, you could be a disability confident employer without employing any disabled people whatsoever. Absolutely. And that's not the case now. So they are changing it. They are improving it. But for me, as it stands at the moment, an organisation being a disability confident employer or leader it's a good indication that the organisation is at least looking at disability and has it on their agenda. But it is certainly no guarantee that every hiring manager within that organisation understands what inclusion is all about. So I'm a bit cynical.
Yeah, I think for me, the phrase that comes to mind is actions speak louder than words.
Definitely.
And, we talked about the valuable 500 and how you have to make a commitment to what you know, it's going to be at board level discussion and a board level agenda, but also you make a commitment about what you're going to achieve within the next 12 months. And I also, you know, I'm aware, you know, I'm a Purple Light Up ambassador with Kate Nash and Purple Spaces. And I think if you want to be a truly disability confident employer, you should absolutely be advocating annual initiatives which demonstrate that you do what you say, and you absolutely need to be driving forward and creating disabled employee networks. And you know, I'm in a, I say unfortunate position, and I use that word loosely, in that, you know, ABM is part of a global business. You know, our parent company is ABM Industries in the States, and we are eons ahead of them, even if you consider us to be quite backward. And, you know, my vision, and I've said to Kate, my vision is that we would have a global disabled employee network, because we'd all have very different things to be talking about.
Absolutely.
And you know, for me, that's the type of stuff that we should all be aspiring to.
Oh, definitely. And I think for me that one of the benefits of Disability Confidence Scheme is seeing the good practice of other organisations. And when I was assessing Heathrow, there were so many examples, as you said, Sam, really, so many examples that came out of that, of really good practice that had just been done because people wanted to do the right thing and make sure that customers were, you know, their needs were met, and that colleagues' needs were met, and actually finding out all that good practice and then sharing it with other organisations who might be able to then think, oh, actually, we could do that, we could adapt that for our organisation. I think that's a really positive thing about Disability Confident, in that, and certainly globally, that should be the case. We should be sharing good practice. And I always moan about how far behind we are in the UK, but I do know that globally, we're actually, you know, hard though it is to believe, way ahead of many other countries in terms of disability access and inclusion. And, you know, maybe we should be, you know, helping other countries, other organisations learn from people who are doing a good job.
I would, Jane, you said everything that I was going to say about disability, actually, which is great. I mean, the thing with me is, over the last 5 years, I've just been a sponge, to be very honest. I've just listened and I've listened and I've listened, and I've listened to over 1,000 disabled people talk about the challenges. And what you all said about Disability Confident is what I hear them say all the time, in terms of, you know, the tick box exercise, and great, you know, great concept, but actually no delivery, no follow-up, you know. So there's lots of different things that I've heard, but I also agree that I think, you know, between all of us that are on this call, we're all trying to create a movement. We're all trying to change the perceptions that people have about disabled people in our own ways. And actually, Mark, going back to your original question, I didn't answer that one. If I were to say what the challenges were from my perspective and from what I've seen, the first challenge is obviously all these negative perceptions people have, but us not creating enough role models for other disabled people to follow, right? And I think if we can create between us role models that become inspirations, e.g. Martin, right, in terms of entrepreneurship, then actually you inspire other people. That's what happens. I use Martin and Srin all the time in my conversations about industry stories. Look at what disabled entrepreneurs are beginning to achieve, right? And the other issue that I found is that a lot of people with disabilities, because of their knockbacks, they have lost their confidence, right? And they are settling for second best. So what they think they want to do is not actually what they really want to do, right? But they've settled for their second best. And actually, they can become their own barriers sometimes because of that lack of confidence. So one of the things we've had to do with our entrepreneurs, actually build them up with confidence training, you know, to help them to really be the best versions of themselves, so that when they put themselves in front of people, they are speaking from the heart, with passion, with drive, with commitment, with motivation. You know, that I think is, so it's almost like they've become, some of them, I'm not generalizing, generalizing here, but a lot of the ones I've spoken to have become their own worst enemies because they've become cynical at their chances of getting a role. So I think there's a mindset shift internally that we need to change as well.
I kind of partly agree and partly disagree there. So I think the confidence issue is absolutely spot on. I think that, because society has for so long has said disabled people are less than non-disabled people, we can kind of internalize that. And when I became disabled in 2004, I should have known better because I'd been, promoting the benefits of employing disabled people for years, long before I became disabled. And then I spent 2 years focusing on what I couldn't do. Now I'm disabled, I can't do this, I can't do that. So actually I see how it happens. I can see why people lose confidence. And what we are saying to our candidates is actually, you're not just as good as other candidates, you are premium candidates because you bring with you other skills like the things that we have all had to develop, overcoming the barriers that we have to face on a daily basis. So problem solving, project management, creative thinking, all of those things. But I do think there's a danger in having inspirational role models. For us, it's more about showing ordinary disabled people doing ordinary jobs, because there is a kind of, around 2012, there was a bit of a backlash against the Paralympics. Oh, those people can break, world records and you can't even get a job. It's that kind of, and most people aren't Paralympians. Most people don't want to be Paralympians. I have no interest in sport. I have skills in other areas. I don't particularly want to break any, world records on running, even if I could. So for me, yes, it's good to have role models in different areas, but there's a danger in kind of, well, this person, look what they've achieved. They're amazing. Look what they've achieved. Yeah, but I could never do that. Whereas I think if we focus less on inspirational role models, but on ordinary role models. So here's a person who's doing an ordinary job with an impairment, and they might have adjustments, they might not have, but it's possible for them to do it. And actually, yeah, there are the Martins and all sorts of other people that I have huge admiration for. But I think alongside those kind of shining examples, there need to be very much everyday, ordinary people doing, because not everybody wants to be, an inspirational supermodel. Sometimes people just want to get a job and be valued for what they do. So I think, yeah, confidence is great, but the way we get confidence is about saying there are lots of possibilities, and you don't have to be a poster boy or girl for disabled people. You can just go and get a job and do it really well and be valued for it, and that's good enough. And actually, yeah, so we kind of say to our candidates, when you're talking to employers, don't go in with the attitude of, please feel sorry for me, give me a job, because I've been to lots of interviews and no one's given me a chance. Go in and say, no, you wouldn't use these words because it would sound a bit arrogant, but kind of, you're so lucky that I've actually decided to apply for this job, because on top of the skills that all of your other candidates will have, I also have all of these other skills that I've developed through a lifetime or years of having to overcome barriers that other people don't even have to think about.
No, I couldn't agree more. I remember working with the students a few years ago, and we used to kind of practice kind of mock interviews and difficult situations and difficult questions. Some of them are legal, and we may have all faced them in the past. But this guy, I remember, he said to this future employee, and I forget his disability. I think it was something to do with his arm movements. But he said, "Yeah, there's a few things I can't do, but do you know what?" He said, "I'm disabled, and I try so much harder." And he said, it was often, we know it, sometimes it's just that comment. It's right. It's the confidence. It's the, I'm bigger than this. How dare you judge me on whether I'm in a chair or what with a stick or whatever. I'm bigger than this. And often with employees, that confidence emanates.
Yes, it does indeed. So just moving on to the next question, because obviously I know we've only got about 20 minutes left, is do you think COVID is, obviously with the current crisis we're in, do you think it's had a positive effect on disability employment or negative effect?
Both.
Both, okay.
Let somebody else speak because I don't want to dominate.
That's okay, that's fine. Has anyone got any views on that?
Well, from what we've seen, there are, I think, to be fair, there was there was a groundswell really building up before COVID anyway, in terms of employers beginning to look at people with disabilities in a different way. I think they were becoming more open. And I think, you know, we should thank the Valuable 500 initiative, I think, for helping to put that on the agenda. I think what I've seen since COVID, so from an entrepreneur point of view, I've actually seen a lot more people come to us with ideas that are non-COVID related, okay, or some of them are COVID related, typically in the PPE space, right? But, you know, there's a lot of people that are coming with ideas, but actually there's an influx of people with disabilities that are looking for jobs now because they realize that there is a different mode of working, right? So the way that we're doing this now is the new way going forward, right? So I think there's a great opportunity to get a lot more candidates on board. And Jane, I'm not sure if you've observed that, you know, over the last few months, but I think the employer mindset is definitely shifting as to whether or not they're ready to actually start recruiting in a more aggressive way. I don't know if many of them are in a position to be able to do that, but I think the intention is better now than I've witnessed it in the last 3 to 4 years. So I would say that, I think I've had the illness. I know I've had close family friends that have died, unfortunately. So it's tragic what's happened. But actually, I think there are some positives from what I've seen in the disability space that have come out of this, definitely.
So does anyone think there's going to be like any negatives? Because from what I've read, that they're thinking that there might be a significant increase in disability unemployment, obviously, because I think they're thinking it's about 11.7% unemployment by 2021. And again, being a disadvantaged group, we're the ones that are actually most likely to actually be impacted on, or possibly the first person that might be made redundant or to actually get rid of. Has anyone got any views on that?
I think that's a huge danger, and I do think that whatever progress we were making before COVID. I mean, our biggest argument before COVID for employing disabled people was because we were nearly in full employment then, and employers were complaining about skill shortages, and we would say, you've got skill shortages, we've got candidates with those skills, let's put them together. And if you've got skill shortages, you need to look in a broader candidate pool if you need to get those skills. We can't use that as an argument anymore, because there won't be skill shortages. That we saw the other day, there were 600 people applying for one job. I mean, that we're in a very, very different market to how we were before. And I think for employers, often, sadly, diversity is something that's really good to do when we're in a great place. But when there's a crisis, it's one of the first things to be dropped. And Talent International did some research where D&I generally had gone way down on the agenda since COVID, because there were more important things to worry about. And that's diversity generally, let alone disability specifically. So I do think that for a lot of disabled people now, they will be competing with hundreds of people for each job. And for a lot of hiring managers, they're going to pick the easy option, the one that doesn't need workplace adjustments, or they feel a bit embarrassed about, or whatever it might be. But the flip side of that is really, as we've already said, that remote working, flexible working has become that. I mean, disabled people have been saying for years and years, can I do this job from home? And I've been told, no, it's not possible. And then all of a sudden, non-disabled people need to work from home, and it is possible.
And everyone's doing it now, aren't they?
Oh, who'd have thought? So it's kind of, so now that it's actually been proved and it's become much more commonplace, and lots of people, disabled or otherwise, are saying, I quite like this working from home gig. I'm not missing my 2-hour commutes, and I like spending more time with my family. So if working remotely is going to become more commonplace, and I'm not for a second suggesting that all disabled people should work remotely, because lots of people don't want to, and all workplaces should be accessible, but it does open up the job market to more people who can't, access some offices, either because the offices are inaccessible or the transport to get them there is inaccessible. So I think the new normal, depending on what that looks like, but I think whatever it looks like, it will include more flexible working. It won't, I don't think we'll ever go back to the kind of stereotype that everybody in work has to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in a place of work. And, you know, people will be more open to job sharing, job carving, part-time work where some of the work is done maybe remotely, some might not be, different ways of working. And so now what we can say, absolutely honestly, is if the new world of work involves remote working, flexible working, doing things differently, then disabled people are your perfect candidates, because we have been doing all that forever. You know, doing things in a different way, finding different ways of doing things, working flexibly, challenging the status quo, you know, not taking no for an answer. We come across one barrier, we find a way around it or over it, above it or whatever. And actually we've become premium candidates once again, but actually whether the employers will see it that way remains yet to be seen.
Well, I echo what you say there, Jane. I've been advocating remote working because for both my companies, basically half the people that work for us actually work from home. And that's one of the reasons why we've been able to attract disabled people, because I've actually had one chap who's worked for us the last 2 years. He lives in Middlesbrough. I've actually never met him, but he's got Asperger's. But again, it's because of that remote working that he basically said, because I said to him, because he's got a master's degree in computer science, and he couldn't go to interviews. He just couldn't go out to the door to go for interviews. So the moment I actually said to him, oh, actually, don't worry, you can work from home, he was happy. And I think, okay, there are going to be some disadvantages at the moment, because again, because of the unemployment rate is going to go up. But I think it could possibly present some advantages to disabled people, especially people who are basically housebound.
Well, we were a bit smug at the beginning of lockdown because all of us are disabled and we all work from home. We don't have an office. So when everybody else was saying, oh, we're going to work from home, what's that? We were quite smug because it's just...
Exactly. That's just normal, isn't it? For a lot of disabled people. Is anyone else got anything to contribute to that?
I was going to say that there was a brilliant article that was written by a lady called Dr. Nancy Doyle, and it went into Forbes. Did you read it? It was brilliant. And it was about how society has become disabled just by being locked down. And that was fascinating. So it's like that. And actually another thing I've realized through our charitable foundation, we set up this thing called the Sharing Circle, where we have a lot of people with disabilities that just come in and they share their stories. And the funny thing is, the people without disabilities are learning from those people, exactly as Jane said about the isolation and their stories and, you know, what they've been used to doing over the last number of years, which is not the norm. They're actually teaching a number of people that haven't got a clue about how to handle a situation like this. And I think that is, for me, that's raising the profile of people with disabilities. It's not about employment, it's just about raising the profile of people with disabilities in a very positive way, actually. I've really seen a lot of that through our charity.
The danger is, I think, that though, that, you know, if there is one, the word of caution is that, oh, well, disabled people can work from home and all disabled people will want to work from home, because there'll be lots of people who don't. And we should still have accessible transport and accessible buildings and all of that stuff as well. So for me, it should be an option for everybody, disabled or otherwise. You know, it's just good practice, isn't it, really? But it shouldn't be, oh, you're disabled, therefore you can work from home. Because, you know, we know that there are people who go to work for the social side of it and enjoy that, you know, not everybody likes working from home. I love it, but not everybody does.
Right, David, did you want to say something?
I was just going to echo some of the comments. For a lot of larger companies, especially in the IT sector, it's the norm. A number of years ago, they had the sell and lease back, with only leasing back a quarter of the properties. And you mentioned an pleasant attitude that I have when students have often, or members of staff, have often. I've discussed in the early stages of a lockdown, they're really suffering with coping with it. I've had a number of colleagues say to me, how on earth do you cope with being disabled and not being able to go out? And there was one person that I do have to bite my lip, went a little further than that. I won't repeat what they said. But I think that a lot of people are realizing that, well, hang on a minute, this is the world of some disabled people. They don't have the maneuverability and the accessibility of things. This is it. And we to some extent are in that lucky space in that we do have the choice, yes or no, but actually, and this is what society is realizing, this is more in terms of working from home, that people are so productive working from home. Just touching on that, and so De Montfort University, where I work, absolutely fantastic in terms of diversity employment, and it's so keen to help. The realization I remember from years and years ago was the employment of disabled people. We all know that in many places, when you do a disability audit, they fear that it's going to be millions and millions of pounds worth of investments afterwards. And when you actually come with the solution or ideas of a solution, how many times do they have the biggest smile on their face? They're just so amazed that, hang on a minute, it's tuppence halfpenny. Is that all we need to do? And in the IT world and working from home, often it is. It's maybe some speech software, it's a faster broadband, it's a different sort of laptop, it's an accessible keyboard. It's the tiny little things that make a difference, that make people productive.
And it sounds like people are giving them real estate and having an office somewhere in central London or somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, we wrote an article a couple of months ago on access racing, basically on our blog, and it says I think it says something like, you now know what it's like to actually be disabled. And it was actually a very popular article because a lot of people can actually then, all of a sudden, they kind of knew what it was like to actually feel socially isolated. So it's actually quite interesting indeed. So in terms of actually just talking about general employment, so what would be your kind of utopia? Does anyone actually want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I sort of didn't want to. I'm just feeling very agreeable to everything.
Everything
everyone's saying, I wholeheartedly agree with. I guess just to give a couple of thoughts on the last couple of questions, where I think the disability confidence stuff was to kick things off. It was let's raise more awareness and get, particularly on the employment side, more awareness. I think what Jane was saying about the Paralympians and even the sort of narrative that has come out from me and Shrin, it's more powerful for people that just don't see disabled people as valuable. So it's sort of being a marketer, we have to break down the audience and the message and the objective. And I sort of feel that looking back, it's the right thing to do, and that got us a little way. And it's the legal thing to do. There's the DDA, and obviously the Equalities Act is now the legal side, but it's hard to enforce and to prove and take it through court. So that only has so much. But I think when we touched upon the Valuable 500, the business case is, like it or not, it's the bit that's going to move businesses more to this. And Toby Milden, who Jane and I know really well, talks a lot about diversity and inclusion as a growth driver. And I feel like we were starting to get traction with that narrative that disabled people we are a large group of consumers, and the talent pool that Jane referred to, particularly when there was a skills shortage. So bringing it to COVID, we're at a bit of a crossroads because we might lose some of that momentum and we might start to miss out on opportunities, and it might not go the way that it was, or we really double down on all these positives and the fact that it's an amazing pool of skills and talent, all this kind of stuff, obviously more in the particular area of employment, and the fact that maybe there is more incidence of digital skills for certain disabilities for different reasons. That's where the economy is going. The fact that there's more flexible working. So it's a crossroads. And I think back to this question now, Mark, the vision, I think it is that everyday people that show the next generation of disabled people what's possible there's lawyers, there's doctors, there's teachers, every part of society. And the reason that's embraced is not just because it's the right thing to do or the legal thing, but everyone is valued with their own unique talents, and we all have unique talents, whether we're disabled or not. So I believe, as a positive optimist, that's where we'll end up, and that won't surprise all of you to hear that. But I also think where the attention goes, that's where everything else follows. So the more we paint a better future, the more different parts of the puzzle will rally around that. So we need optimistic leadership, but we do need the nuts and bolts to follow that as well.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said.
Mm.
Has anyone else got anything else? Sorry?
Just about that I think for me, and I think for all of us probably, inclusion is good for everybody. So it's not just about, you know, oh, we've got to make things right for disabled people. If we get the recruitment process better, it's not just better for disabled candidates, it's better for all candidates, and it's better for all employers because they're going to get the best talent.
Yeah.
So I think for me, you know, sometimes I think with any of these kind of equality issues, people think it's a zero-sum game. So if we give more power to black people, white people are going to lose out. If we give more power to men, men are going to lose out. And it's not about that. It's about, you know, if there's a rising tide, we all rise. So, and I think for me that utopia will be when we understand that inclusion is beneficial for all of us and worth everybody striving for, no matter whether they're disabled, black, white, gay, straight, you know, whatever, that actually inclusion is the goal and that we will all benefit from that.
That's fantastic.
That is utopia. It's never going to happen, is it? But I mean, that's what I like.
Wow. Well, we can live in hope, can't we?
Yeah.
Does anyone else actually need to add anything to that?
No, I couldn't have said anything better myself, to be honest. I'm completely on the same page.
Well, listen, I'd like to thank you all. We actually managed to do this within an hour. That's absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much, as I said, because I know that you guys are also busy. And the fact that you've actually just taken time out just to be with us and actually, obviously, you know, first basically to actually talk to you about your experiences. So as you know, we're launching a fundraising campaign on the 31st of August, looking to raise between £15,000 to £20,000 for access rating. And just to give you a quick idea, I'm not going to go into it, but essentially we're raising money for PR because as an organisation, we now got to the stage whereby we need a lot of PR. But again, you know, the reason we've kind of got into a situation where we are now is, again, was because of COVID, because of part of what we do with access rating is that one of our partners is a access auditor. So before COVID, we had about 5 access audits ready to go. So because of that, that's then impacted on our cash flow. So that's the reason why we now think to ourselves, okay, what do we do next? We did look at social funding, but the basic getting like a social loan, but the interest rate was a bit too high. And also we've heavily invested with over £40,000 we put into this already. We could not afford to take on any more debt, and because of that. So that's why the reasons why not, you know. So we are doing this build up. We are looking to for the crowdfunding campaign. Hopefully, we're going to raise that money, and hopefully, if you can all get behind it. And as I said from the beginning, any money we make as a social enterprise goes into our work that we do in the SEND schools. We've actually started our SEND work. We started with Ashfield Academy, which I actually went to as a child myself. I spent my first year there. I wasn't there for long. My parents put me out. But Rich is started basically just doing job coaching there. We've set up a remote office for the children. Unfortunately, because of COVID again, you know, there's not, you know, we had to kind of just put that on hold. But we are looking to roll that out to other SEND schools. So I just ask you to please, obviously, get beyond our crowdfunding campaign, circulate it, donate if you can, and that's it. Has anyone got any questions before we finish off?
No,
Okay.
I've just got one thing to say,
Yeah.
Mark, and that's that I hope within the few coming weeks we'll be able to celebrate a success ourselves.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
I hope. I don't know. I hope.
Fingers crossed, Samantha.
Yeah.
That's super. Thank you so much, everyone. And what we're going to do is that we're going to put this up tomorrow on social media. And just, you know, you guys have been brilliant. So you guys enjoy the rest of the evening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
Everybody.
Meet everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Take care. Bye.